Yeah, I have the privilege to introduce to you Mr. Shlomo Zalman Jessel from Israel. Shlomo Jessel holds a BSc degree in psychology and an MA in clinical developmental psychology. He was already a speaker last year at our conference in Slovakia. He works with individuals and families around the world by phone and by Skype, many of whom are struggling with attraction-related issues, sexual and internet addictions, and intimacy issues. He also teaches and supervises therapists individually and in groups. Originally, Shlomo Jessel is from Canada. He now lives in Israel and is a founding member of the Jerusalem Narrative Therapy Institute. We are very happy that you could make your way directly from Canada here to join us. Thank you very much for coming, Shlomo.
Thank you, Dr. Von Holt. My mother wrote that introduction. So we're going to talk about identity today. And it's going to be following up a lot on what Dr. Carolyn Pila spoke about earlier, perhaps from a different perspective, perhaps different examples. And what I'm going, it's important to know that what I'm going to say today, when I talk about people with different kinds of problems, such as SSA, which is same-sex attraction, that each person is unique. So what I'm going to say doesn't necessarily apply to every individual with SSA. I've worked with hundreds of people with SSA individually and in groups, and I've not found any two stories identical. And I think part of our work is getting to know our clients well enough and deep enough to be able to appreciate their individuality. So Carolyn spoke about the treatment of SSA in women with SSA, in women with lesbian issues. And like Carolyn, I practice narrative therapy, and I'm also finding that a narrative approach is a very effective approach to therapy, especially so with people with SSA and attraction issues. Let's see if we can find out why that is, and I'll show you a few examples of a narrative approach that you can use with your clients. So the title of the talk is The Essential Work of Identity, changing how the client sees him or herself. And this is an essential part of therapy, is how the person sees himself or herself. Research by Joseph Nicolosi Sr. and others, they show that a change in benefits is change in identity is one of the key benefits that comes out of therapy. When they do surveys after therapy, what changed for you, what was good? Or if you look at the doctorate, a doctoral study by Elan Carton, you see that one of the key benefits is a change in what they call a change in identity. And we're going to look at effective strategies for that change in identity, including the transition from I'm seeing myself as bad to I'm human, and I'm defective to I'm worthy. I'm gay to I happen to be someone who has SSA. These are important shifts, and they're a major benefit that can come from therapy. So identity has a lot to do with what we think about ourselves, and that's so much what SSA is about. It's so often about shame and about negative self-perceptions, judgments we have about ourselves, a sense of inadequacy. I spoke about this last year. Last year, I spoke at length about the role of shame, versus self-acceptance. I'm sure that those of you who are therapists here have seen in many of your clients that this shame fuels the SSA, as well as other behaviors, whatever people are coming to you with, whatever behavior that they're finding difficult to change, or thoughts. Shame is the enemy. It's one of the things that goes on. That's why men with SSA so often get triggered. They see themselves as lacking something which they see this other man as having. That man is strong and I'm weak. That man is confident and self-assured. I'm self-conscious and always have to be careful what I say. That man is smart and I'm either stupid or I'm just pretending to be smart. That man's real and calm and he just flows, whereas I'm always uptight and everything is pretense. These are the kind of comparisons going on. And usually it has to do with what the man feels makes a man. His view of what a man is usually that person he's attracted to. That's the kind of person I want to be versus me. He may not be aware of these comparisons, but often in therapy this is what comes out. Not feeling worthy and wanting a connection to people who are worthy, who I see as worthy. Now, we all know by now, I hope, that success in therapy is not about changing 180 degrees from gay to straight. We're talking about degrees, we're talking about dealing more effectively with SSA or whatever issue one's working with. It's very rare to see complete change where the person never experiences SSA again in his life. But that's often what clients are thinking when they come to us. That's what they figure they have to do to be normal. I have to get rid of this problem completely. And that's coming from shame. It's the idea, I'm not okay as I am. I'm not okay unless I get rid of these attractions completely and forever. So they come the first meeting and they say, I'm gay and I have to change it. And I have to change it completely and have to change it really fast. Because in 3 months I'm starting university and I can't have this problem there. I can't do that. And then you kind of gently tell them that complete change is rare in your experience and that this is a process and in some aspects of it might be lifelong work. But for sure that it can take years, and then you watch their face drop. Because the shame is that I'm not normal, I'm not okay, I'm unworthy, I'm immoral, I'm disgusting, I'm bad, I'm not good enough. And that's what's propelling the need for I have to change completely. So there's a paradox. Last year I spoke about the paradox of self-acceptance, or the paradox of SSA. The paradox is that in order to really move on beyond SSA, one has to have self-acceptance, and that means complete self-acceptance with all my warts and problems and including acceptance of the SSA. In order for the SSA to be diminished, I actually have to accept the SSA whether it diminishes or not. And that's the paradox. Nobody ever changes through shame or through shaming them. That's the myth that the people who don't understand therapy or who deliberately don't want to, that's what they throw at us, that we're going to harm people by increasing their shame. We're going to make them feel worse about themselves and then they're going to commit suicide. Good therapy reduces shame. Good therapy builds the person. Now, whenever I speak to groups like this, I always have stories of my clients in my mind, and the stories I have are always the most recent ones, the people I was talking to the past few days or whatever. Now, I was traveling a lot the past few days, so I wasn't speaking with any of my clients on the plane, but on the way here, I was thinking about a few of my clients. I was thinking about a guy named Dave. I was thinking about Bob. I was thinking about Greg. I was thinking about Bill. So those are on my mind. I'm thinking, for example, of Dave. Dave came to me. He's a middle-aged guy. He's smart. He's likable. Just a little higher, please. Dave thought of himself as worthless, disgusting, hopeless, pathetic. It's even hard for me to say these words applied to a person. It was hard to hear them from him. This is what he thought of himself. Except when he was high from marijuana or alcohol, which he had a problem with. And he was having phone sex with men, occasionally having anonymous encounters where he would act out certain roles where he was dominated, and he felt humiliated at the time, he felt humiliated afterwards. He had a lot of social anxiety, especially in group settings. He had self-loathing. He was seeing a psychiatrist for years for depression, and he wants help with his SSA. So we tried, I was just in touch with him last week, so that's why he's on my mind. We tried, I remember a lot of things. I know a lot of techniques because I've had a lot of supervisors. I was with Nicolosi Sr. in supervision for about 10 years. Every month we would meet. And now I get supervision from his son, Joseph Nicolosi Jr. Some of the things that have been described here by Timothy Long and others, I'm familiar with. And I use these techniques with him. We used EMDR, maybe we used some hypnosis. He went to 12-step groups, we did many things. But we weren't making a lot of progress. We'd make some, and then he'd be back to this tremendous self-deprecation. It was very sad to see. And he tried other therapists too, and it wasn't just me. So Dr. Nicolosi Sr. said at the time, when I started, he said, "You're not going to get anywhere with the SSA until you get past this self-critical part." And of course, he was correct. And that's what we had to work on. So today, by the way, Dave is in a totally different situation. He got engaged a year ago to a woman he met at his Alcoholics Anonymous group. It's not, I wouldn't say, oh dear, I think it makes a lot of sense. In the world today, and certainly in North America where he is, where do you find people who are dedicated to working on themselves? Where do you find people who work on things like gratitude, overcoming resentment, dealing with anger? You often find them in these kinds of groups. And Dave was somebody who was interested in working on himself. And he was a sincere guy. He had deep convictions. So it's not surprising. It's not surprising that he met his destined partner in such a group. They have a depth of understanding. So he was married this past summer, and now he's employed in special education, and he's also got a part-time job at a detox center, and he's considering becoming an addictions counselor. He reports no problems with SSA. We don't speak very much anymore, but when we do, it's just about the normal kind of problems that every newly married man has to deal with when he's coming to share his life with another person. Now, how did that happen? How did Dave evolve into the man I see today? How did Bob evolve? Bob was a young man. He was experiencing depression. He would act out for hours and hours online using a certain app, which I won't name because why create a stumbling block for more people, but the kind of app that you use to meet up with anonymously with other men. There was a lot of masturbation going on, and he was feeling horrible. This wasn't how he wanted to be living his life. He went to Sexaholics Anonymous. That didn't really help. Maybe in some ways it made it worse for him. He was not aware of any attraction to women, but he wanted to get married. Now his depression is very much improved. He's running a successful business that he founded. He's dating girls, and he's enjoying that, and he's looking forward to getting married when he meets the right one. And he helps organize and staff workshops for men with SSA or with other difficulties. He's a support to other men, and he's in a very good place. How do they do this? How do they change their lives around? How do they overcome the crippling effects of shame? So what I'm going to speak to you about that is applicable to all our clients, not just people with SSA. It's applicable to all our clients, regardless of the issues they're coming to. Now, my clients tend, I've noticed, over time, to go into counseling professions or coaching or psychology, either professionally or not professionally. I'm not sure why. But it means that I have a lot of people I can draw on for other experiences. So I called up Bill last week. I said, I'm giving this presentation and I'm nervous. What should I say? You know, what was helpful about our therapy? Because you did really well. Bill became a narrative therapist. He's in Australia. So here's some of what he said. He said, therapy could be about being weak. It's like, I need help, and you're the expert, and you're going to help me. That can be very disempowering. The therapy that I want to do is about putting the client in a position where they're important, where their values and their goals and their hopes and their dreams are significant, instead of being in a position that you're flawed or problematic, and I'm normal, and that's how we're going to work. Actually, they're in a position where they ended up teaching me something. I'm looking forward to them teaching me something that I might not have known. They're not problematic. My clients are resourceful, capable, and powerful. It's a whole different positioning. It's not the therapist, the expert on I need help, which reinforces this belief of powerlessness that they already have, that they're inadequate. It opens up space for a new way of self-perception. So this kind of positioning with the client, that alone can make a difference. And I think that here, Carolyn Pila must have spoken about that kind of positioning quite a bit. As much as all the techniques I've learned, this is like an important part that goes with all the techniques. It's even when I apply EMDR, I'm going to do it in a narrative way, and we could speak about how to do that. My clients know that I share their ideas with others, that I talk with you about them. At my family, when we're sitting together at the table, I said, you know what Dave told me yesterday? Something really neat. Or you know what happened to Dave? Which means to my clients that they have something to contribute. That's what I believe. I did it last week by asking my clients, what should I speak about? What do you think people need to know? And it's very different from what some other therapists do, where their client isn't teaching or imparting anything of value. So this is all Bill talking, this is what Bill told me. It creates an arena where the client has a different way of expressing themselves, a respectful environment where they can experiment with something new, something different. You're creating an opening, a space where they can experience that. The power dynamic is different, and in that space something can flourish. The therapist isn't programming or suggesting the identity. The therapist is creating a respectful and curious atmosphere where the client can experience himself in a different way. It's genuine listening. I don't need to convince my clients that they're valuable. And I'll tell you what, if I try to convince them, it won't work. Their negative inner critic has so many ways of defeating, dismissing every single accomplishment, award, or compliment, right? It's, well, he's just saying that because it's his job, or he doesn't really know me. If he really knew me, then he wouldn't be saying this. You've experienced this, right? With your clients, maybe with yourselves. I'm not going to convince them that they're of value. I'm creating an atmosphere where they can experience themselves in a different way, a richer way, and from that they have more choices, and more choices of which door to take. I need to enable them to discover in their own way that they're valuable by asking questions and responding in a way that creates space for it. So they become over this journey, experts in themselves, about themselves, and they discover their meaning and values, and I treat that with respect. And it's also important, my client pointed out, Bill said, because there's transference going on between the client and the therapist. If they had a critical parent or a distant father, that can be triggered by the therapist. So when the therapist has, instead of an authoritative position, he has a gentle and curious disposition where we're kind of like equals, this is less likely to trigger those kinds of feelings. Whereas a strong directive approach, I'm doing something to you and you're going along, that can become a power struggle. This is much more collaborative, the narrative approach. So, I'm going to illustrate this in a moment, but it's not really about changing attractions. It's about changing one's relationship to them. And that's what makes the attractions manageable. That allows one to live a good life in accordance with one's values. And it's not about me, the therapist, changing the clients. It's about opening space for them to explore new perspectives. So I don't change people, and I don't even think I know how. Thank you. So maybe try this. Think of a negative judgment that you might have about yourself. Maybe something like, I'm lazy, or I'm disgusting, or I'm a loser, I'm depressed, I'm an anxious person. Something about yourself that you might think sometimes. I'm a slob, I'm useless, I'm ADHD, I'm gay, I'm bad, I'm damaged, I'm disorganized, I'm unattractive, I'm obsessive. Find something, think about that, or write it down. A negative judgment you have of yourself, or a limiting judgment, or that others have of you. Maybe it's something that you've labeled yourself, or maybe other people have said that about you or thought that about you, and you've come to believe it kind of yourself. It's become part of you, this belief. It may not be accurate at all, but it has an influence, and you find yourself believing it to some degree. So do that. Just take a moment, write down some belief about yourself, some negative judgment or limiting judgment. Okay? Okay. So look at that judgment. What's it like to see yourself that way? What emotions come up when you see yourself that way? How does it affect you? How does it affect you when you meet a new person? When you go to a job interview, what effect would that have? Are you thinking in your mind, who would really want to hire me for a job? Would they really want to hire me if they know how useless I am, or disorganized, or whatever the word is, whatever the label? If you're going on a date, if you had this idea about yourself, would you think, like, who would want to marry me when I'm so disorganized, when I'm so unattractive, when I'm so obsessive? So these are judgments you have about yourself. Are there problems or beliefs being expressed as who you are? Something you've become convinced by. You have trouble getting up, so you call yourself, I'm lazy. Maybe you heard it from others, maybe you heard it from your parents, but these have become internalized. What's that like? Notice what's that like. Okay. Now I want you to, what we're going to do, externalize that belief. Change I'm anxious to anxieties present in my life. Or instead of lazy, I have trouble getting up in the morning. Or instead of depression, I'm depressed. Depression is something I often experience. Or I'm someone who struggles with whatever. Someone who struggles with SSA. Or I'm struggling with someone who struggles with something else. Okay, and write that down. I'm waiting for everybody to, to stop seeing the pens in motion, but everybody's using tablets. Would someone like to share what they noticed? You don't have to say what the judgment was, but what did you notice when, how did this externalizing affect how you relate to this problem? Or how do you think, now, can you compare how you might behave or how you respond, looking at what you wrote before and what you wrote now?
Okay.
Good.
I feel a lot lighter when I was thinking the negative thought. I felt a pressure in my stomach and a tightness. And then when I reframed it as something that happens to me often, that I feel a certain way often, I can breathe better.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else like to share? Okay. Did anyone else feel a difference? Put up your hands if you notice a difference in... Okay. So that's a bit about externalization. I'm going to talk about that some more, though. Because I find that my clients tend over time in their journey to go from, if this is the path they choose, to go from I'm gay to I'm same-sex attracted, to I have same-sex attraction, to I have an issue, I have a problem, or I have a challenge. And then eventually to this is one of many issues that I struggle with, and it's not all me. They go from this is my whole life is defined by my homosexual attractions when they start, to I happen to be sexually attracted to men. This is one of my challenges in life. It's something I'm working on, one of many things. It's part of my life among many parts. So the work is about identity. It's about seeing ourselves as separate from our problems, about seeing ourselves in ways that are more beneficial and helpful. How do we facilitate that change? So already from the first meeting with a client, I'm talking about SSA. If that's what we're working on, I'm talking about SSA as something they have. It's a problem, but not them. In my language, I don't say someone is gay or homosexual. It's always a person with SSA, with a problem. A person with attraction to men or to women. And once we get to a stage where the client no longer labels himself with a problem or with a negative judgment, then he can look at it more objectively and he can work on his relationship with that problem or judgment. He doesn't have to define himself as weak or bad or homosexual or depressed. And then his shame is reduced and the problematic behavior decreases. More important, he now has the space to consider what he might actually have. He might, a more realistic perception. He might see strength and courage and determination, which is what we see in our clients that they don't see. No. And they can consider, do I want to define myself based on my orientation? Do I believe orientation is a central part of how I view myself as a person? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe I should define myself in some other way. Maybe I can define myself as a kind person or compassionate. I mean, I get sometimes indigestion. Sometimes I get angry. And sometimes, let's say, I get SSA. But I don't define myself by that. I'm an indigestible, I don't know. My identity doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to be something I was born with or labeled. It can develop. I can experiment. I can try things on. I can change. I can interview it. It gives more room for change, more room for choice, more room for movement. It's opening up a relationship with it. So that's externalizing, seeing the problem as separate from the person. And it has many benefits. It opens up new possibilities. It frees people from this like heavy seriousness of their problems because they're objective. They can just see it as just something they have to deal with, and it presents options for dialoguing with the problem, about the problem. So like Dr. Pila said yesterday, we don't ask a client, how old were you when you discovered that you were gay? Or, instead we said, when did same-sex attractions first show up in your life? How has it remained constant, or has it changed over time? Are there times of the day or times of the week when it's worse or better or more intense or less intense? Are there situations where it's been more present or less present? I find like with a lot of guys, when they go, let's say on a hike or a different kind of environment with a bunch of guys who are friends, for some of them, the attractions go way down in certain environments. For some of them, the attraction might go up, but sometimes it goes down. So I'm really curious about that. And I asked them, what does SSA have you thinking about yourself? And how does it get you to think that about yourself? Carol and Pila spoke about personifying the problem. Now, I have a way of doing that I really like. I'm going to demonstrate it to you in a moment, but this is after we got a label or name for the problem. First, we get a label for the problem or the voice or the feeling. It helps to see it as separate from yourself. We get a name for it. It could be a temporary label even, because sometimes it's hard to come up with a label or the labels change. Maybe they call it SSA. Maybe they call it the attraction thing. Maybe they call it, if we work deeper, we understand that it might be called Mr. Perfectionist or the voice of reality. These are names that my clients have come up with. It could just be called fear or anxiety. Whatever the issue is, it could just be called, we can't come up with a name, or they're uncomfortable talking about it, we just call it the problem. Right? How long have you had the problem? When did it first show up? What does the problem get you thinking about it yourself? How does it do that? Who else knows about the problem? Okay. So what I'm going to do now, this favorite technique I have, I'm actually going to interview the client playing the role of the problem or the negative thought. So for this, I need a volunteer. I need someone who speaks English well, who thinks quickly, probably it should be a man, because I work more with men than with women, so, right? And I'm going to interview him, and I'm not going to interview, you don't have to worry, I'm not going to interview you about you. I'm going to tell you what your problem is, and you're going to play that role. Okay, and you're going to come up here. So it really takes some guts. So, but it's okay, you're not exposing yourself. You're going to come up here and you're going to pretend, or act out. Thank you. Okay, have a seat.
Thank you.
Your name is Larry?
Lair.
Lair. Okay. Okay, so, and while I'm interviewing Lair, you could ask yourself the same problems about whatever problem or belief you have. You could ask about the voice of unattractive, the voice of I'm annoying, whatever. I'm going to interview, I think, thought to ask you to play the role of not good enough. I could have asked you to play the role of SSA, but I find with so many of my clients that what's really under there is I'm not good enough. So I thought that's a good one to role play. Okay, so Peter, you're going to role play not good enough, and I want to tell you that in my experience interviewing problems, well, let me give you some background. There was a period of time when I moved to Israel when there was a high-tech boom, and it was much more profitable to work in high-tech than it was in counseling. So I moved into marketing writing for high-tech firms, and I also got into journalism. So I got training as a journalist, and that's what I'm going to use today. So I put a pencil behind my ear, and I get my notepad, and I sit with the client, and I tell them, I'm going to interview you. You're going to play not good enough. And my experience with these interviews is that negative voice, that problem, is very proud of his accomplishments. Don't hesitate to show off a little as I ask you these questions about your tactics and what you do.
Okay.
So thanks so much, not good enough, for agreeing to this interview. I'm sure my readers will be very interested. How long have you known Lair? Were you there his whole life? Did you?
Probably. I knew him from about the age of 2.
About the age of 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what happened at 2? Do you know?
Well, that's my earliest memory. It was the age of 2.
Lair's earliest memory?
Yeah. Lair's earliest memory was around the age of 2.
Okay, so he was there a long time.
Yeah.
Wow. And how has your relationship with Lair changed over time? Has it grown stronger? Has it changed in some way?
I think I know Lair better now than I used to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What do you know? What are some of the things you know now about Lair that you didn't know before?
Oh, golly. He's creative. Now I think he's empathetic with people. He's actually very intelligent. I don't know. He's very caring.
Remember, you're the voice of not good enough.
Okay. Well, should I be what I know that's not really good enough because I'm role playing all this? Okay. He's been overweight most of his life, and that created great body shame.
Wow. Okay. So, and
I'm not good enough. Am I doing I'm really concerned. Am I doing this all right? I feel some anxiety about this.
okay. So you're doing fine, right? Because there are no right answers here. I'm not expecting any specific kind of answer, Lair.
Okay. That helps.
Okay.
I feel better now.
What is it? So you're not the voice of not good enough.
Yeah.
And what is it that you do? Do you talk to him? Do you put thoughts in his head? Do you?
Oh yeah, lots of thoughts. I put lots of thoughts into his head. You don't compare to other men. You are. You're not as strong as they are. You aren't as good looking as they are. You're weaker than they are. They can do things that you can't do. All kinds of thoughts like that.
Oh. And how do you do it? Do you do it by words? Do you do it by thoughts, images, something else?
Generally by thoughts. Sometimes it's a visual thing. I could see a man that I see is strong, muscular, tall.
When Lair sees a man who's like that, then what happens? What do you do?
There's a certain amount of envy or jealousy with that. There's a desire to be that man.
And do you tell him certain thoughts that get him thinking that way?
Yeah, probably. Thoughts like, I wish that you were as good as that guy is, but you're not. Maybe if you could somehow be related to that person and they liked you, maybe then you might feel better. Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Right. And okay. Are you sometimes harsh or gentle? How do you speak to him? What kind of voice do you use?
Generally, I'm not harsh with him. I would say there's more sadness involved and there's more shame involved with that. And
do you speak to him in his own voice, or do you kind of have a voice of someone else?
I would say I speak to him in his own voice.
Okay.
I just kind of put those thoughts in his head,
It sounds like you do a really good job.
I've been doing it a very long time, actually.
Well,
I think I started putting thoughts into his head when he was 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got a lot of experience.
Yeah, I got an early start. Lots of practice.
Are there things that make your job easier? Are there things you team up with, like hunger, fatigue, or other problems?
Yeah. I could say hunger and fatigue are there. Stress is there. Sadness is there. Loneliness is a big one.
And these are things that make your job easier.
Yeah. Shame and criticism are really, really good allies with all of this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there things that make your task more challenging?
Yeah. Sometimes there are these really nice people who speak really compassionate and caring words, and they make it tough for me to do my job. Sometimes there are people who are affectionate, and they certainly get in the way of the things I'm trying to
They
tell.
make it harder.
Yeah, they do.
So how do you deal with that when somebody like that is talking to him or is in his life?
Well, I sort of redouble my efforts. I look for new ways. I look for new ways and new ideas to pop in there and show him that there's worthlessness and that he's no good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what effect do you have on Lars' relationships?
Wow. I think I was able to limit the number of relationships that he had for a long period of life, for long periods of his life. I think I was also able to keep him on sort of a safe level so that he was hiding himself and not wanting to share or trust people, because if he did that they might feel a closer connection, and that was scary for him, and I could scare him with that. Uh-huh.
Okay, so you would scare him with the thoughts about what could happen.
Yeah. Fear about the future.
Fear about the future.
Yeah, good. Another good ally.
Could you, I'm sure the readers of my newspaper would really like to hear some like war stories, like a time that you were really successful, really got him good.
Wow. Well, you know, I told you I started when I was 5, giving him the negative stuff. Larry was getting a little bit chubby. You know, he had been eating too many calories, and he's never been very active athletically or stuff like that, so he's beginning to fill out. And his mom and dad were actually very helpful at that point, because they had a talk with him as a 5-year-old and told him that he was getting fat, you know. Wow. And I knew that a 5-year-old couldn't process this information. You know, I mean, he doesn't have the maturity to understand what they were trying to say. And the parents were kind of stupid about the whole thing anyway, because instead of taking charge as parents, as adults, and doing something that they could do, because a 5-year-old doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what to decide, they just talked to him about the getting fat stuff. And the message I gave Lair was this: you're bad. There is something wrong with you. You're broken. And he believed it. Years and years and years and years and years. I mean, he just went for so many years, and boy, he heard that voice, and I could just replay that message. It was like a videotape. Just pop it in, hit the button, there it goes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, why do you do this? Why do you try to convince Peter that he's not good enough?
Peter?
Sorry.
Peter who?
In my notes, I wrote Peter because I didn't know what name I'm going to get. I was hoping there'd be somebody named Peter who would come up.
Are you trying to make me feel bad?
You're doing a great job.
Okay.
Why? So, why do you try to convince Lar that he's not good enough?
Oh.
What's your motivation here?
Golly.
You said something about safe.
Safe. Yeah, I think there's this aspect of being safe if you're not connected, if you're separated from relationships and from people. They don't see who you really are, and letting people see who Larry really is kind of a scary thing, because for him, he's afraid that they won't like him, and they'll reject him, and they'll push him out.
Okay, but are you serving any purpose in his life? Like, often I find that if that clients will find that the voice of shame, the shame voice, is to protect them so that he doesn't take risks and doesn't get hurt or embarrassed, or maybe to save him from arrogance or some other moral thing he has. There's all kinds of good intentions. As Carolyn Pilas said, the problem might not be pushy and dominated. It may have his interest at heart. It's not necessarily malevolent in the client's eyes.
Rather early on, I think Lair felt some rejection from his father, that his father didn't really love him or accept him for who he was. And I would say pushing back with this stuff and keeping him separate from the relationships was a way that he could feel some protection and separation from that hurt and that pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're coming to a close now.
Okay.
There's two more things. First of all, what's your hope for Lar? Remember, you're the voice of not good enough.
Not good enough. Now that's confusing to me. What is the hope for Lar? Because I'm the voice of not good enough.
Well, what do you want from him?
What do I want from him? I want him to be. I want him to feel safe and protected from pain. In one sense, I'm trying to kind of shield him from getting hurt again.
Okay. Good. Thank you so much for joining us. Not good enough. Now, in actual session, first of all, this can take more than one session. Sometimes it gets really interesting and it'll take more than one session. And so we say, whether we'll continue or we'll have part two. Another thing is that I would incorporate is a retelling. I will say that I don't want to misquote you. I don't want to, get the words wrong. As a honest reporter, I've got to, make sure I understood it right. So I would go through it again, what we learned, what he told me. He probably would ask add some more details, right? Okay, and then we will stop, and then I'll go back to the client. I'll say, thank you very much, not good enough for joining us, and now I'd like to speak to Lar. Okay, and that's where we go. Thank you very much for helping us. Please go back to being Lar, and don't continue being not good enough. All right, so the next thing that I would do in this interview after this would ask the client, what was it like listening to an interview with that voice or that problem? Right? And I'm going to be very curious, asking all kinds of questions. Right? I might ask him, and this could do several sessions worth of exploring this. I would ask him about this role of not good enough in his life, what meaning it has for him, what kind of a relationship does he want with this problem? Does he want not good enough to be present sometimes, but not as intensely? Does he want, well, let's say the problem is something else, Mr. Perfectionist. Does he want it to be there some situations or not? What would be different without the influence of not good enough or without the influence of anxiety? Now, if there's time, I just want to know, because we started later than... Okay. One of the things I often do is make the client a consultant. I tell them that about other clients or things going on or maybe something about my children, and I'll ask them for what they think advice they would give. It could be hypothetical or real, because that means that they have something to contribute, and I really believe this. Sometimes I introduce my clients to each other, anonymously or not. Now, I don't do this with a new client because I have to know that they're trustworthy and I have to be able to tell the other person that they're trustworthy, to keep confidence and things like that. But I might take a more senior client who's further on his journey, or maybe finished his journey, at least his journey in therapy, and ask him if he's willing to come in and talk with one of my more junior clients. And I'll interview the senior client about what he got from therapy, or how he grew, or what he changed, and how he did that. And that's powerful and beneficial for both. It's one more person that he's showing that he has this problem to, and this is called making the client a, what was the word I used? I'm a consultant, right? I am jet lagged. This is not pretend. I truly experience my clients as having the ability to know and convey things in a way that I myself cannot do as well. Now, I handed out a resource sheet. These are some of my more useful resources. And on this resource sheet, I put some different kinds of groups and peer-led experiential workshops. And that's because I find workshops and groups absolutely powerful and irreplaceable. The homosexual person, this is a quotation from Stefan. Stefan spoke here last year. I don't know if he's here this year, but I wrote this down. The homosexual person, I wouldn't call somebody that, the person with homosexual attractions needs identity-establishing relationships that help defeat his sense of shame and build a self that fits reality. So we have groups, we have workshops. Some of the workshops that I send people to, if they have SSA and it's a man, I send him, I don't know if I send him, but I'll let him know about Journey into Manhood, which is run by an organization called Brothers Road, brothersroad.org. It's very valuable. Yes, they'll be scared. Yes, they'll have lots of questions. It'll be difficult for them at first, but it really makes a difference for so many people that it's worth it. I send them to other kinds of workshops. I send them to something like called the New Warriors Training Adventure, which is nothing to do with homosexuality. In fact, it's very gay affirmative. But nevertheless, the work they do there, which includes a lot of psychodrama, creates a bonding, gives them a new view of themselves, and people can come out of these workshops for the first time in their life experiencing a bit what it's like to not feel SSA or not feel the shame around SSA. It's incredible to watch. I just, one of my clients while I was traveling went to a workshop. There's a guy in, I won't say which country, but I've been working with him for a few months. He's very much like the way Lar presented somebody. He's afraid to take on new tasks or new clients because if he doesn't do them exactly right, then maybe he'll be criticized or maybe someone won't like him or something. So anyway, he went to this workshop, and when I arrived here, I got a WhatsApp from him saying, well, that was amazing. And then I got another WhatsApp saying, I just told my parents about my SSA. It went really well, right? He wasn't ready to do that before. These workshops make a difference, and that's why I'm pushing them. At least look into them, at least make it available, the knowledge about these things. And group work as well. And in the groups, we don't talk very much about sex, and we don't talk about acting out. That's really not what the groups are about. It's about building relations, about identity. It's about learning to see that I am not so different than other people. That deep down, I'm just human like they are. They also have insecurities and worries and stuff. Maybe different ones, maybe at a different level. That's so much of what this is about, is learning that I'm okay as I am. That I have shadows and problems, but so do others, and that people can see me for who I am and still be my friend, still like me, still want to connect with me, and that, indeed, that's the way to build real intimacy, which is what we all really need. And what SSA is so much about is that craving for real, authentic intimacy. There are also groups online for people who can't get to an in-person workshop. Brothersroad.org has some online groups. There's a Christian organization called Joel 225 that has groups. The workshops themselves have follow-up groups for people that meet weekly. Sometimes there can be 12-step groups that can be effective for some people. All right. So those are some of the strange practices that I do, and that some of the things that people the other therapists in my clinic that I work with, that we found helpful. And it gets stranger. You know, I mentioned Dave before, the guy with the drugs and alcohol problem, you know, that he used to have, and he got married recently. I mean, one of the sessions we had with him was all about his dog. He had a dog when he was a kid, and I asked him all about what the dog knows about him. And it was a whole session, and I learned that that dog knew that Dave was kind and compassionate and reliable and dependable. I had a session with a client who was a violinist, all about his violin, what the violin knows about him. Right. If you want to learn more about the strange but effective ways we do therapy, I'm starting a seminar course. It'll be by phone or online or something. And I'm also will bring in many of the experts on SSA, like Nicolosi, like Rich Weiler, different people with different expertise. It's kind of like a seminar course. And so you can email me at szjessel, or szjessel for any American people on Facebook, at gmail.com. I'm Canadian, so we speak normally, but I just thought there might be some Americans here. Okay, and I'm also available for supervision. Now, there's an expression in English. In English, it's called unsung heroes. I don't know what the expression is in German or Slovakian or French, but what it is people whose greatness goes unrecognized. People struggling to overcome the limitations of SSA, they almost get no support or applause because they kind of keep themselves secret. They don't want everyone to know. And in any case, the gay world tells them they're in denial. And the non-gay world, including the more traditional people, also assume all kinds of negative things about homosexual attractions. So for the most part, their struggle is secret and nobody knows and nobody recognizes and certainly nobody applauds them. So let's close by applauding them, the unsung heroes who come to therapy, who stand up against a world that derides them and their struggle to live a life consistent with their values. One more minute. And let's applaud the IFTCC, whose members are willing to take a stand for the right and freedom of the people to choose the therapy that they want and is consistent with their values, to choose their path. Thank you.